Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show as we're on live Thursday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and the Roku channel at Northeast Streaming Sports. Good morning, everybody. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, Jack Hirsch, legendary Hall of Fame boxing writer, as we get you updated on today's sports. We were away for a week. Our last show was on Sunday with a big football show, so we come back on Thursday, kind of get up to date with everything. And today, Jack, on the show, we have, for the first time this year, our head coach from the Connecticut Falcons semi-pro football team, Matt Tomczewski. Semi-pro football will be starting up here soon, and we do carry it over on Northeast Streaming Sports. And we personally know Matt has been on a lot last year with some of the players. We also have on a couple boxing guests, Jack. We have Santos Perez from Miami Herald, a boxing writer. We also have on Ed Levine, the IBO president of the sanctioning body, the International Boxing. It's not association, Jack. What is it?
IBO, International Boxing Organization.
Organization.
Yeah.
That's right.
One of the sanctioning bodies. We think of normally the four sanctioning bodies: the WBC, the WBA, the IBF, the WBO. But the IBO is around. I mean, they could hold their own with the others at times, and we'll hear what Ed Levine has to say, their president.
Well, definitely will, and it'll be great having him on. So, Jack, we come on after we go on during the playoffs when we're on Sunday. We have the games on Saturday and Sunday now. And so if we got time, we'll go over a couple games I thought really interesting. But first, let's get everybody updated with the NBA standings. And first, you have the Bulls at 27-12. You have the Nets at 26-14. The Heat at 26-18. The Bucks at 26-17. The 76ers at 23-17. And in sixth, the Cleveland Cavaliers at 24-18. In the West, you have the Suns at 31-9. The Warriors at 20-10. The Grizzlies on a 10-game winning streak at 29-14. The Jazz at 28-14. Dallas Mavericks at 22-19, and the Denver Nuggets at 20-19. The Bulls got beat by the Nets last night. The Bulls have a good defense. Kyrie Irving returned. He really didn't do much. I think he had 4 points or something crazy like that. But Durant and Harden were outstanding, Jack, in that game. And maybe Chicago was worried a little bit too much about Irving and not concentrated on Durant.
And I doubt that they were so worried about Irving that they wouldn't concentrate on Durant. Durant's the main guy on the Nets. He's a better player than Kyrie Irving, and Kyrie Irving's outstanding. Don't get me wrong. Nets broke it open in the third period, and James Harden really played a great game. For the Nets, it was a bit of a statement game because the Chicago Bulls have been an elite team in the NBA this year. They've taken a big step forward. And if they're not in the mix to win the NBA championship this year, they're about a year or two away. I mean, they're really on the rise. So for the Nets, it was a statement game. It was a reminder of what they're capable of doing when they have their big three there, Durant, Harden, and Irving.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Durant and Harden run that team, and they're both in at the same time. They really don't need Kyrie. They really don't. Harden really can score.
I disagree, Mac. Mac is as much contempt as I might have for Kyrie Irving. I recognize he is a great player, and he is a difference maker between the Nets taking the next step in winning the NBA championship and not. We've been down this road before with Kyrie Irving, with the Boston Celtics. They were one game away from going to the NBA Finals, but Kyrie Irving was out. Had he been in, the Celtics would have gone to the NBA Finals, maybe won the NBA championship.
Maybe.
Last year, the Nets, Kyrie Irving was out. Had he been in against the Milwaukee Bucks at the end, chances are the Nets would have advanced, and maybe it would have been them winning the NBA championship and not the Milwaukee Bucks. He's a difference maker. is
I don't know. I just don't agree with everything you're saying there. I don't think he's a difference maker because when he's shooting the ball, it takes the ball out of Durant's hands and Harden's hands. So I really don't believe that he's a difference maker. Last night he sure wasn't. So I disagree with what you're saying, Jack. I think Kyrie Irving is a lot like Westbrook, but he can shoot the ball better. I think Kyrie Irving is not a team player at all. And I don't think that he adds anything to the Nets except takes the ball and shoots the ball. And I think the Nets are a better team without Kyrie Irving. I think they have a better shot at getting the championship without Kyrie Irving because I think their benches and their role players are just as good. So I don't agree with everything you said there. I don't think Kyrie Irving is the reason why the Nets will go to the championship. Not at all. I think it's go ahead.
Well, we can go back and forth. Is Kyrie Irving selfish? Absolutely. Do the Nets have a weak organization, an organization that lacks character? Absolutely. Do they have a coach who basically defers to the players, who won't stand up to them, and Steve Nash? Absolutely. I mean, James Harden is one of the great scorers in NBA history. It should be Kyrie Irving playing the point and using James Harden's firepower along with Kevin Durant's firepower. But for whatever reasons, you call it selfish or not, Kyrie Irving told James Harden what he wants him to do. You play point guard, let me score. And James Harden doesn't want to make waves. So James Harden just wants to fit in. Kevin Durant is a good friend of Kyrie Irving. And as great a player as Kevin Durant is, I've said this numerous times, he's not a leader. He is not a leader at all. He's just merely a great, great player. Okay, one of the better players I've ever seen, but he doesn't take a leadership role. Kyrie Irving, as much contempt as we have for him, he is a leader. Okay, he tells the other guys what to do, and they follow. Maybe not a good leader, but nevertheless a leader. They follow Kyrie Irving. Okay, and that's been to. It was to the Celtics undoing the 2 years he was there. It's been to the Nets undoing so far. But listen, if it all ends with a championship, then it becomes worth it. But I'll admit, it's hard sometimes to root for the Nets, even if you're a Net fan.
Yeah, listen, I just don't think he adds anything to the team because when he's scoring all the points, that means Durant's not and Harden's not. So it really, in fact, there was some stat I was looking at last year, I think it was, whenever he scores over 30, the Nets lose. So I'm not a big fan. He's a great basketball player. I'll be a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about it. But as far as team chemistry goes, he's no good. Period. That's all I got to say about that. The Grizzlies, Jack. I mean, they're playing some great ball over there in the West. I didn't even think about the Grizzlies cracking the top six, and there they are playing very good basketball over there, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, what if they won like 10 in a row? And Morant is establishing himself as one of the best players in the NBA. And it wasn't that long ago that there was a little bit of a debate in the draft, Zion Williamson, Jay Morant. Everyone knew Jay Morant was going to be a top-of-the-line pro, that he was really going to be really, really good. We all knew that. But this is Zion Williamson. So if the Pelicans would have passed on Zion Williamson and taken Jay Morant, and Zion would have turned out to be a superstar, it's the kind of pick you never let down. It's the kind of pick that gets you fired if you take Jay Morant and he's merely a very good player and Zion's a superstar. So you kind of get a little conservative, don't take the gutsy pick Jay Morant. But Morant, I'll tell you, is one of the best players in the game. And when we think of the top teams in the NBA, we don't think of the Memphis Grizzlies. We don't think of them at all. And now they're coming out of nowhere. Might they continue this run? I mean, who knows?
You don't. And, the way it's worked out right now, Zion Williamson is just, what are you going to do? You can't.
He's been hurt. He's been hurt. It still might turn out to be the right pick at the end. But listen, you never know what teams we think are on the rise. Look at the Atlanta Hawks with Trae Young last year. They beat the Sixers in the playoffs. They seem to be the upcoming team in the NBA. And this year they're struggling. They're a few games under 500. They've been a major, major disappointment. Instead of continuing to take steps forward, they've went backwards, and that's been like a bit of a shock. And Trae Young who is supposed to be one of the faces of the NBA going forward, is just another guy this year.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens by the end of the year, Jack. Maybe they kick it in. It's still what, half season or so. You're talking at 24-18. You're at what, 43 games.
It's approximately the half season. We're starting the second half now.
Yeah.
But listen, half the season, let's face it, is a big body of work. It's not a small body of work.
I agree.
And if a team has struggled the first half, there's a good chance they'll struggle the second half, even though teams have been known to get it together. And also teams that have gotten off to nice starts the first half, it sometimes starts to unravel the second half. So they're going to be different storylines. Like the Cleveland Cavaliers and a lot of good young players, they're standing at 24-18 right now. They've been a pleasant surprise with Jared Allen and Mobley. Even with Colin Sexton out, they've been performing really well. Let's see if they can keep it up. The Washington Wizards have been hovering around 500. Let's see that they keep it up with their chemistry. The Knicks at 500. Are they going to stop playing the way they did last year? Are they going to basically stay the same? Are they going to slide backwards? Certain things are going to happen in the NBA where one team is suddenly going to take off, unexpectedly and be good, and another team that's been good is all of a sudden going to start to plummet.
I agree. Good morning to you too, David. Glad to have you aboard the show as you regularly come in, and we appreciate it, trust me. Let's get to the college basketball real quick. I'm just going to give you the standings, Jack. Real early yet, and it really doesn't ramp up till we start hitting around March anyway. But right now, Baylor's in first at 15-1, followed by Gonzaga at 12-2, UCLA at 10-1, Auburn at 15-1, USC at 13-1, Arizona at 12-1, Purdue at 13-2, Duke at 13-2, Kansas at 13-2, and Michigan State at 14-2. So those are your rankings right now. I really haven't started getting into college basketball yet and following the players and teams, but with college football closing out, I'm going to be over there peeking at them too. So,
well, two storylines, I think. This is supposed to be Coach K's last year, right. I believe. So for sentimental reasons, people are going to be rooting for Duke to do it one last time, with Coach K. But also there's a Gonzaga element. Will they ever win the national championship? Gonzaga has been knocking on the door. It seems a long, long time. Is this the year they're finally going to get over the top?
Yeah, listen, great program in the top four almost all the time now. So, great program there for Gonzaga. The Big East, I'm hoping, starts making a little run too here at the end of the year too.
Because, are they still around the Big East?
Yeah, I can know. Right?
Okay, I mean, remind me of the line from Rocky with Spider Rico. Rocky says, "Yeah, I won last night." Spider Rico and his brother-in-law Paul, another guy in the bar, said, "Is he still around?"
Yeah, right.
Wouldn't it be great if they recaptured glory years? But
I think the closest one right now, I think, is Villanova. If they're still there, if they're not in the Atlantic, I'm not sure where Villanova is anymore. But they are. I think they're sitting at 12 or something like that. So let's talk a little NHL scores in the National Hockey League. Well, at least the divisions. Let's set that up. Let's not go into scores. Let's just talk about the divisions real quick. In Atlantic Division Eastern Conference, you have the Panthers in first at 24-7. Tampa Bay following them at 24-9. Toronto at 23-9, and the Boston Bruins right now are sitting at 20-11th in that fourth spot. In the Metropolitan, you have the Hurricanes at 24-7, followed by the Rangers at 23-10, Washington at 28, and the hot Pittsburgh Penguins, who I think only lost one game in the last 20 or something crazy, is at 21-9. In the Central Division, the West Conference, you have the Predators at 24-11, the Avalanche at 22-8, the Blues at 21-10, the Wild at 21-10, and finally in the Pacific Division of the Western Conference, you have the Knights 23-14, those Mighty Ducks at 19-13, the Kings at 18-13, and the Sharks at 20-16. Jack. So
Mac,
again,
who's going? Mac, I know how meticulous and organized you are. Is this a test to remember these standings, Mac? All these
well,
points.
I just want to add on our first show to get everybody up to date where the teams are at before we start hitting them with the scores all week. So I wanted to get that set. David, yes, we do know that the Yankees hired a minor league baseball woman for their manager.
That was a couple of days ago, Dave. That
he
didn't
just
just
saw
come over.
he just saw it on ESPN. Let me let you in on something. I was at the Yankee press conference yesterday with the announcement of the new woman, Deborah Grable, I think it is. I was just there with Brian Cashman at one of the many news organizations there. She's a delightful young woman. She's been in baseball for almost 10 years, strength and conditioning coach over with the Cardinals, moved over. He's a batting instructor. And Cashman kind of surprised her with the offer to be the manager there. And she talked a lot about Jack, and it'll be on the Spreading the News, the exact things that they talked about, because I took the notes for Doc over there. But she talked a lot more about getting to know the players, getting to know their families, with the new kids coming in at the Division A, the lowest level. She wanted to help them adjust. Of course, she'll help out in batting instructors, but she sees herself as an administrator, a person there to delegate authority to the different coaches and be there to get them competitive, working as a team. And a lot of it has to do with the personal aspects of these young players. Jimenez being, the young star that came from I think it was the South America. I'm not sure if it was Cuba or where he came from. I don't know that exactly off the top of my head, but he's supposed to be a new Mickey Mantle or something. And she discussed how she was just talking to him about everything but baseball, his family, how he adjusts to the United States, character, stuff like that. Seems like a great young lady, Jack.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of a danger there, even though I'm not saying she's not doing it the right way with the personal touch. She's going to have to make some tough decisions down the line, cutting players, giving players less playing time.
Sure.
And you become too emotionally involved with players and their families. It makes it harder to make those decisions. You're less likely to cut a player. You're less likely to maybe take them out of the lineup because you want them to succeed so badly. Okay.
Well,
it might be a little hard to look at certain things objectively. I'm not saying she's doing things the wrong way. Her approach is refreshing. Okay. It really is. But there is a little element of danger there as far as doing your job the way you're supposed to, because this is a type of business where you have to make some decisions where you put your emotions aside. Okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But even to the professional level, as you heard Byron Williams say about Bill Parcells, and they cut Byron Williams, by the way. He knows his family. He knew his mom. He knew, his dad. I mean, they know all that information, because you got to be somewhat personal with the players and be able to communicate with the players that way. So if you're not knowing all these things and talking to them, it's hard to communicate. And a lot of coaches make the mistake of being standoffish with the players. That's the worst thing you could do, Jack.
Mac, I couldn't. If I were a coach of any team, I can't greet the guy's wife and kids, talk, smile, and then cut them the next day.
No, you have to, Jack.
But I just, it's hard when you're that emotionally involved. It doesn't mean you don't care for them a great deal. And it doesn't mean you don't interact and have these one-on-one discussions about more than just the sport. But they have to understand all along that you as the manager, you as the coach, might have to make these emotional decisions that you really don't like. Okay.
Well, of course they know that. They're professionals, Jack. They know that they got to perform or they're not going to be there. That's just a totally different subject. What I'm saying is, a lot of coaches that are standoffish, you don't get the personalization with the players. And what happens there is you kind of put a wall between you and the players, especially when something's going wrong. Tom Coughlin had that problem with players a lot until he started getting leadership committees together where he could communicate with them. Parcells really didn't have that problem. Parcells will communicate with you. Jimmy Johnson would communicate with you. I'm going football because that's what I know the best. And I imagine Stengel was the same way. I read the old articles where they talked together, and they weren't friends.
Stengel DiMaggio didn't care much for Stengel the way he.
Well, I remember the story about Rizzuto when he went through the lineup with him and said, "We got this." All right, so I think there was some kind of at least mutual respect there. And she talked about being the first woman in that. But if you Start Spreading the News, they probably will run the interview there, and you'll be more.
Let me say this in defense. Some people are going to put down this high and say, "Well, how could you hire a woman? A woman has never played Major League Baseball. They're not qualified." Well, they're wrong on that account. Because let me throw this by you. You take women teams. Men coach women teams all the time. So if a woman is qualified, there's no reason she can't coach a man's team. Because let's face it, who assumes the leadership role in society for the most part? It's the mothers. They assume that leadership role in life in general. So if they could do it in life in general, as long as they understand fully and then expert in the sport that they're coaching, that would make them qualified. And they have to be judged on the merits of doing the job. And they can't be judged on gender. Let's say a player who should never get into it with a manager, starting to argue with a manager. A male argues with a male. Well, a male player should be able to argue with a female manager, a coach.
Well,
the same way gender should play into it.
This would be a whole show for me and you, because I got a lot of different opinions on that. And now don't necessarily agree 100% with everything you're saying, but we'll leave it at that, Jack. So also, let's get into some news from the NBA. Damian Lillard plans to have surgery. In fact, he's going to have it this week to address his abdominal injury. Will keep him out 6 to 8 weeks. So he's going to miss a big portion.
If you asked me, Mac, most overrated play in the NBA right now, it might be Damian Lillard. I mean, he hasn't taken Portland to the next level. He's complained as far as wanting to get out. And they have a big decision to make whether they should re-sign him or not. And Portland, it's going to be big money.
Well, he's still in a contract, Jack. He just signed an extension.
When did he sign? Are you sure he signed the extension? I heard they were talking about it. I don't believe he actually signed it.
I think he just signed a 5-year extension, Jack. If I'm not mistaken, that's what I saw this morning. So Damian Lillard, he would have to be traded if somebody wants to trade him, but they can't they can't get rid of him. And maybe he's not playing so well because of his abdominal injury. So yeah, check verify for me.
I wasn't aware about the extension. I'm going to verify because I heard there was talks about it, but that was it.
And while you're doing that, safety Eric Weddle comes out of retirement to join the Rams after defensive back Jordan Fuller got injured. So that's another thing on the field for the Rams as they bring somebody else in. And New York Giants owner John Mara admitted that this is the most embarrassed he has been by the state of his franchise. So if he thinks he's embarrassed, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm not going to go off on that. That would take me into another show too. So Jack, right now, as you're verifying my information.
Well, no. Listen, I didn't want to really comment. I'm so bored with the Giants. Too bored to.
No, I'm talking about that. I thought you were still doing
Damian Lillard's extension, Mac. I got to look into it. You're blindsided. I mean, he didn't sign any extension, to my knowledge. Well, one of our listeners, because I got to do the show, Mac. I got to do the show with you. I got to keep on task. With one of our listeners out there, do that research, boss.
Yes.
Damian Lillard, whether he signed the extension or not. I don't believe he signed it. I would have heard about it, Mac. I pride myself on keeping on top of these things. I would have known about it.
Well, you're
making it up, Mac. You're making it up just to make yourself look good, like you have your sources inside the NBA.
Well, from what I read, Jack, that's what I read. But anyway, backstage right now, we have our friend from last year, covered their team, the Tar Heels. In fact, he coaches 2 teams. And there's a lot of news coming out about the Connecticut Falcons this year. So our coach, our friend, head coach Matt Tomcheski is going to come in and join us after almost quite a few months. So let's bring up the head coach. How you doing, Coach?
Hi, Coach.
You're muted, Coach. Unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
The 2 teams, Mike, not in the same league. That would be kind of
well, let's, before you start asking questions of something you don't know nothing about, like the Damian Lillard contract check, let's talk to Coach Tomcheski about what the big news is over there. From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Coach, the Falcons and the Tar Heels combined into one team. Is that correct?
That was correct. It didn't end up following through.
Okay.
Basically what we were doing is we were looking to join the same league together and have divisional teams, a lower division, higher division for developmental. But the Falcons ended up staying spring, which was originally our season.
Right.
It's more in our wheelhouse, and after we weighed all the options and everything, it just looked like the better move for both organizations to, for them to stay summer and for the Falcons to stay in the spring and do our thing in the spring like we've been doing.
So you will have the Falcons in the spring like you did last year and the Tar Heels in the summer league.
Yep, the Tar Heels remain in the ECFL, their summer team. The Falcons were offered to go into the ECFL. Like I said, we did weigh out all our options, and we did end up declining that option. We were previously in the TFL, the New York League, which you covered us in last season, which you're pretty familiar with.
Yep.
It was a lot of travel. We were the only Connecticut team. Every team was either New York City or Long Island. It was a very condensed league. And we were given an opportunity to join an independent league this year, which spans all of New England plus New York. So it gives our guys more exposure, more teams to play. And, we're not always traveling in New York City. This league has 2 Connecticut teams, 2 New York teams, 3 Mass teams, a New Hampshire team, and 2 Maine teams. So we have a wide reach now in this league. This league, it's been around for a few years, and it's a solid league. It's growing every year, adding good teams. And we look forward to playing in the spring this year in the IFA and competing against some of these top teams. You got the returning champs, the New England Bearcats. You got the New York Patriots, who were the runners up. There's a couple of the main teams are pretty strong. The Cardinals are strong, so it should be a good competitive season this year.
All right, great. So it's the Independent Football Association, if I got that name right. Okay, so Coach, on your teams, you had, from moving from the Falcons, they moved to the Tar Heels. You have a lot of players that stay with you. Do you have a lot of returning players coming back next year, Coach, that you're aware of?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, we lost the summer. We lost by one score in the championship. We had a very successful season, our first year in that league. The guys are chomping at the bit, ready to get back to work and, redeem themselves. And that's what's great about having the spring season. A lot of teams are still recruiting, still signing guys up, finding their direction, and our guys are on the field playing football. And, like you said, it's not all the guys, but there's a good core group that play spring and summer, and they play all the way through. And that gives us a little bit of an advantage. As far as the spring season, we're excited. We played a bowl game, charity bowl, Labor Day. We're pretty successful in that. We played a charity bowl right around Thanksgiving. That was a pretty successful game. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the one for Christmas due to weather and issues, and so it wasn't. We were doing a toy drive. It wasn't really smart to do it there in the middle of a rainstorm, so we had to cancel that one. But we do have another preseason game coming up in February against a Queens team, and then in March we play our big rival that we play every year from Virginia. They're a national contender team that constantly is going to the national championship. And every other year we play them. We either go to them in Virginia or they come up to us. This year we get to host. So they come up and play us. It's our little North-South Bowl we play. And then our season kicks off second week of April.
There you go.
Coach,
Right
do
at
you
it.
do any recruiting? Certain players from certain of the colleges who are obviously not going to go to the NFL, who might want to continue to play for love of game. I mean, how do you reach out to them? How do you actually get the players? Do they come to you? Do you recruit?
Well, we do a mixture of both. A lot of it is word of mouth because, a lot of players know each other. They work out together, they played together. So a lot of it is word of mouth. We do get out and we do hit the road and recruit. We had combines. I want to say that was back in October, November. We had October, November, I believe it was. We had combines where we had 3 weekends of open enrollment. Guys want to come out and try, show up. We did basically all your normal combine stuff you'd see, position stuff, 40s. Basically get to where everybody's at, see where everyone is. And I mean, we're always taking players. I mean, if we're not full, it's available to come try out. I mean, once our rosters are closed, we put it up. Yet rosters are closed. Thank you very much. But I mean, we're constantly recruiting, and it's a ever moving game because not only are we recruiting, but we're getting recruited from. So we have players that up until a couple weeks ago were ready to go for the season. Now they're going to play arena ball, or now they're going to go play go play some other pro league or something where they can get some money or go overseas or something like that. So it's a constant cycle. So we got to keep the recruits fresh. And, we like to recruit young guys too. I mean, there's guys who don't get into college and it might be for, non-sport related reasons. Maybe they're not very good at school. Maybe they're not, so we try to help those guys out as well. Get them into community college. We have a tight relationship with the Connecticut JUCO team, the Wildcats. So, we try to, if we got younger guys that would work out over there, we like to send them over there because they play in the summer as well. And, we all kind of work together and try to basically get these guys from Connecticut up to the next level because there's a lot of talent in Connecticut that gets looked over. And we just try to give them that avenue that's just not available as it used to be.
Yeah, well, I think you could take your best team from the ECFL and probably the new league, the IBA, and probably beat the UConn football team. They're just awful.
I don't know if I go that far, but they got to do something up at UConn.
They're awful. Well, they hired a new coach, so maybe a pretty well-known new coach, and maybe they'll end up making a couple steps forward over there. Oh my God, I hate that.
It's a process. You hire somebody, and it's going to take a couple years before you start to see those results, before those recruits start to become upperclassmen, and so. I got high hopes for them, to be honest with you. I'm a home state guy here. I got to root for the home state team.
Me too. Believe me, I do. I played with a couple of guys that played on UConn in high school, and a couple of them went to play pro. So they do pick them up for UConn every now and then. So, man, when I went there, I followed you closely. I went out to watch one of the games. I don't know what you thought about last year as far as upgrading the team anywhere. You got a lot of speed on the team. You got a lot of athletes on the team I saw last year. Maybe need to get a little bit bigger on the line, maybe on defense and offense. Have you guys looked into maybe upgrading at those positions?
Well, we have added a lot of weight to our O-line. That's for sure. We've picked up some guys out of state. We've really reached out to upgrade our line size-wise. All our guys on the line last year, I mean, they were some of the hardest working O-linemen in the game, because they all were about 50 pounds undersized, 60 pounds undersized. But this year we were able to pick up some upgrades. We got a lot of depth on the O-line, which we all know is huge. Those big guys are up there banging each other, and they get banged up and they get hurt and they get knocked around, and it's good to have depth. So this year we're going into the season with some really good depth on the O and D line, which is really going to help us out. We have our, obviously our returning weapons, plus, we've added a few weapons, which, we'll see once we get them out on the field, how it all puts together. But yeah, I'm very excited for this year. I think this year you're going to see an upgrade from last year. I think we're going to score more points, and I honestly think our defense is going to be more aggressive. And I really think that this league doesn't know much about us, and I think we're going to maybe take some people by surprise and show them how we do Falcon football.
Because most of the guys have to have a day job. How often do you have the whole team together to practice? Do you have parts of the team practice one day, parts of the team another day? Because guys do have obligations.
Yeah, the majority of the guys all have full-time jobs. They work during the preseason, which is now our camp season. While we're going through, we practice 1 day a week. We just do Saturdays. We do a 4-hour practice. We try to break it down into the first hour more conditioning, a couple hours of play install and play rep, and then we let the guys go against each other and live action at the end of the practice. But once the season starts, we break down to one day a week. We kind of take a consensus of what day works out the best for everybody, that we can get out of work and come to a practice at 5-6 o'clock and get our work in for the following week. That is the struggle with semi-pro, because none of these guys are paid, so they need to still make a living, still need to put food on their table while they're trying to extend their dreams. And
Sure.
so, we work the best we can. There's some guys where it's just, hey, man, I work second shift. There's nothing I can do. Okay, well, make sure you make every Saturday practice. Make sure you make every Zoom meeting, every single, hit the weight rooms. A lot of it's on the guys themselves. So, they'll group together. You have groups of 6-7 guys. They hit the weight rooms together. And, other guys will hit and do field work on Mondays and stuff like that. But, you can only do so much when all the guys are working.
You're right, Coach, but you're basing your game plan and everything around the guys being in shape, being self-motivated during the time they can't make practice, sneaking to the gym, running during the week. Have you ever had players who've just come to you woefully out of shape and you've been really disappointed? You see them, they're no real shape to play football, and you were kind of counting on them.
Yeah, it happens every year. It happens every year. You get a guy who comes back and you're like, what happened? You were in perfect football shape. What'd you do this offseason? And, I'll be honest with you, the biggest culprit is having a kid. Look, every time, well, not every time, but the majority of the time when these guys have their first kid, they put on a few pounds. And then,
Sure, no doubt.
I mean, I'm brutally honest with the guys. If they come back out of shape, I let them know, hey, you're a few steps behind, man. You need to get in the gym. You need to, and the guys know that, because at the end of the day, they're coming out here putting their bodies on the line. They don't want to be out of shape and get hurt or, not be able to perform. So a lot of these guys, they're in the gym, 3 to 5 days a week. They're on the fields 3 to 4 days a week, working, running routes, or, old linemen are doing strength training. And I mean, it's basically up to them. How bad do they want it? Because it's going to show. And, hey, that might be the reason why you're 3 or 4 on the depth chart instead of 1 or 2. I mean, it's all what you're going to get out, what you want to put in. And majority of the guys do understand that. And like I said, you do get some guys come in off the off season a little out of shape, and you just got to, light the fire under them a little bit and kind of get them remotivated again to shed the pounds, and that's typically happens here. And they usually get 1 or 2 a year where you got to get them back in shape. But that's why we like to start so early. A lot of the teams are just doing interest meetings now, and we've been practicing for 2-3 months already.
It's a lot of self-motivation, as you said, players getting together, working out. I get that. So let's talk about the new league you're going in. It's got to be exciting. I mean, the Tri-Borough League, we followed that somewhat. Like you said, there's a lot of travel. Some people make it late, and then you can't go on the game full strength. But it's got to be really exciting for the guys to go out there in this new league and travel around and play people they've never played before at all. That's got to be exciting. And the ECFL part of it, I mean, the ECFL is a pretty well-organized league. They got everything together over there. It's really run well. Are you guys going to still be in that bottom class? They have different classes, so everybody that hasn't tuned in and watched semi-pro football and Matt on with us, they have different divisions where you have the younger teams that just came in, stay in a lower division, and then as they get experience and they play there longer, they move up in divisions. Are you guys moving up there, or are you staying about the same class? Go ahead.
Right, as of right now, no decisions have been made on the on the league, where teams are going to fall, what divisions. I believe, and don't quote me on the exact date, but I believe early February, maybe February 5th or something, they have the league meeting with all the owners and the chairmen of the board, and basically everybody from the league, and they'll go through, and that's where they'll pretty much kind of figure out their rough draft of where they think everybody's going to fall in the divisions, and how many teams are going to be allowed in this year, how many, that's where they kind of wrap up everything from last year and get their plan for this year. As of right now, we're just like I said, there's Tar Heels, the summer season, we're still in off season right now mode. The majority of, like I said, we get the advantage that the majority of our guys are active and playing in spring ball. So, I mean, not just with the Falcons, I mean, there's players that play for the New York Patriots. There's players that play, so there's becoming a lot of crossover of the players playing on, both seasons. So they're coming into the summer in shape, ready to go. So basically we're just waiting on the league to find out where everything's falling. There's a couple new teams coming in. I mean, we know you guys were covering the Northmen as they were building up last year. So we know that's a new team coming in. Right. So all these teams got to kind of find their place. The league's going to make their decisions. Typically it's usually up to the owners themselves and the league to, kind of come to an agreement where these teams deserve to be and where they should be to make the most competitive football. And we'll go from there. Wherever the league wants to put us, we'll go from there. I think the Tar Heels last year could have played AA ball. I don't think it would have, made much of a difference. I mean, we played one AA team. It was one of the weaker AA teams, but we did play a AA team and beat them pretty well. So to me, I felt that, wherever we get put, we're going to come and do our thing like we do. We're going to come to compete. We've cleaned a few things up, and we're just going to move forward. Like I said, we came up so short last year in the ECFL. It's still kind of bitter to talk about it, but it's redemption. The guys got to come back and work hard. That's what it is. And right now, the majority of those same core guys are focused on spring and focused on playing football right now. So they're already getting in shape, already getting ready to go.
Let me ask you with the league, is there a sponsor that gives the championship team any memento? Like Super Bowl teams get rings. I mean, you're not going to get anything that fancy in the semi-pro league compared to the NFL. But is there any memento a championship team is given to your knowledge?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it depends on the league. Certain leagues provide the rings. There are rings, so that certain leagues will pay for the rings. Other teams, leagues that don't provide it, what the teams do is they go out and, they'll go out and find sponsors for the championship run. It's very easy to find sponsors when you're in a championship run. When you're going for the championship, people put their name on your thing to get a couple bucks and get some exposure. So, the rings aren't that expensive. It's not, like you said, it's not NFL. We're not paying $40,000 for a ring, but the guys get a ring. They do get a momentum for it if they win a championship. And, the rings have gotten more and more extravagant as the years have gone on. They're not your plain looking class rings no more. I mean, some of these rings, they look like NFL rings almost. And we go from there. There's other leagues that also will provide, free dues for the team the next year, the buy into the league. If they win the league, they don't have to pay their league fees the next year. Or certain leagues will say, okay, if you win the league, we give you 2 free uniforms from this distributor for next year. So there are incentives. There's other leagues that I know give cash directly to the team. You win, this is your payout. But every league kind of handles it differently, but it all seems to always work out, depending on the league, because what you're getting into. If you're playing for $5,000 cash, or if you're playing for free dues and new uniforms, or if you're playing for rings, what you're playing for. And every organization I'm a part of, whether the league supplies the ring or not, we always have in the budget that if we win, we will provide rings for the guys, because you don't want the guys to have to pay for their own ring after they earned it.
That's the truth. So one other thing I want to go over with you, Mike, before we'll let you go. Are you going to have some kind of live feed? Because last year I really wanted to get the Tar Heels on a lot. We did do a little bit with the Falcons and the Mustangs, I got helped out with. And, we love to carry you, have live coverage. We're on the Roku channel now. I got Eastern Sports Network kind of partnered up with us a little bit. They're going to be providing some live videos from everything, really. So I would love to get you guys. I'll be talking to Northman this year, too, trying to get some kind of live feed from them, too, so that we get live football in there. Because I'll tell you, folks, it's not NFL, but these guys go out there and they play a heck of a game. They got a lot of talent, as coaches said, and some big hits, great quarterback, and some unbelievable runs. I mean, it's very, very good football. So, we're going to want to get that more this year, Coach. I hope we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, with the Tar Heel season, it was a little scrambled. There was a lot of time movements on games. Game was going to be at 5, then it's at 7, going to be at 3. So it was a little tough to get everything together. Once our schedule comes out, we will have our live streamers booked and all of that, and we'll definitely get you that link so you can show us some love.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. I love following semi-pro, especially your two teams, and we'll see how the Northmen do this year. I'm rooting for them to have a good year this year. So, Coach, thank you for coming in. We'll have you on again as it unfolds in the season. Maybe get some interviews again this year. Maybe I'll be able to get out there and see you again this year. I hope so, and watch you guys live, because it was a lot of fun last year. And we really enjoy having you on Northeast Streaming Sports and the Mac and Jack Sports Show. Thank you for coming in, Coach. Good luck, man. Good luck getting this team together.
Thank you. You guys both have a great day.
Thanks,
we will,
Coach.
Take care, buddy. So there you go. Coach Matt Tomcheski not only coaches the Falcons in the spring, but the Tar Heels in the summer, as he goes all year. And he's got it in his blood, Jack.
Mac, I didn't want to cut in because you accused me of cutting him while you were talking to Coach Matt. I thought you might ask him, is he throwing his hat in for the head coaching position of the New York Giants?
Yeah. That would have been a great question. I might, I am friends with John Mara indirectly. Maybe I'll put in that suggestion. I don't know, Jack. Real quick, we're going to before we go to break, your idea for the Giants head coaching position. Let's not talk GM, because I don't know about the GM. But for the Giants head coach position, my opinion, Jack, is it's got to be somebody. I don't want to hear no offensive, defensive coordinators. There's been a lot of head coaches laid off. You got Flores from Miami. You got Zimmer from Minnesota. Both head coaches. Both know how to run a team. Both could bring stability to the Giants right away. Zimmer coached under Parcells. He coached under Jimmy Johnson. He's been to postseason. Flores has done a tremendous job with Miami, I think, in 2 years. Those will be my 2 picks. What do you think?
Yeah, those are good picks, but sometimes you have to look at a reason why people are let go. Now, I've always been very high on Brian Flores. I've always felt he's a great young coach. But one of the reasons the owner of the Dolphins, Stephen Ross, let him go is because of the big turnover. He kept firing his coordinators, and there wasn't stability. And if a head coach is going to keep getting rid of coordinators, keep going through them, why should we have sympathy for him if he's then let go? There's a reason. Owners want stability. But I think a big part of this hiring process, and maybe wrongly so, is they maybe put too much emphasis on how impressive a candidate is during the interview process. He comes across very well during the interview, so they hire him because they're impressed with him, and it turns out to be a delusion. I kind of like more looking at the guy's track record. What's he done? Now, Doug Peterson is a possible candidate for some teams. He won a Super Bowl with the Eagles, Mac. And some people said, oh, it really wasn't Doug Peterson. It was his offensive coordinator, Frank Reich. That's why Carson Wentz played so well with the Eagles. Well, Frank Reich had Carson Wentz this year, and it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Carson Wentz finished the second half of the season very poorly. He was good the first half, not good the second half, and the Colts missed the playoffs. So maybe Doug Peterson had a lot to do with the success after all. I mean, we don't know. There are good candidates out there. There's Mike Zimmer. Bill Parcells put the Vikings down for letting go of Mike Zimmer. But, some of these former head coaches, they tend to be overly protective of guys who are on their staff. And Bill Parcells, to his credit, more so than any other head coach I've ever seen, with the possible exception of Jim Lee Howell back in the 1950s, who had Vince Lombardi and Tom Landry as his coordinators. You don't get better than that, Mac.
No.
That's the all-time best. But Bill Parcells had great coordinators. It's legendary. Bill Belichick, Tom Coughlin, Sean Payton. So Mike Zimmer was one of his guys. But sometimes, just because a guy's a great head coach, like Bill Belichick, arguably only the best NFL head coach of all time, it doesn't mean his coordinators are going to be successful. His assistant coaches have been an absolute flop on the NFL level. The latest has been Joe Judge.
That's true. It's true. And, I think to me, and that's why I will argue anybody that Bill Parcells may be the greatest head coach ever, because not only did he coach players, but he coached coaches. And he is one of the most, I mean, you could even put him in with Howell, because Howell really didn't run that team. Howell just let Landry and Lombardi run it. I read a lot of stories, being Giant fans, about what Howell really did.
Howell, who was a coach of the Giants at the time. Yeah.
Parcells ran that team. But he always said, my job is not just to coach the players, it's to coach the coaches. And man, did he do that. And to me, Zimmer, if you get a team in 4 postseason playoff games in 9 years, you're doing pretty well. And not that he's Bill Belichick, but the man can coach. And he will put a defense there, and he'll put a running game in there. That's for sure. If anything else, the Giants will have a good defense and a good running game, because everywhere in Minnesota had that too. So I'm kind of hoping for Zimmer, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with that whole thing.
Well, back to Brian Flores quickly with Miami. He reportedly didn't get along with the GM there. When you don't get along with the GM and you have a big turnover in your coaching staff, and you're letting people go whenever things aren't quite going the way you want it to, it's not a comfortable situation. Listen, I remember the line, the owners of the Golden State Warriors, they let Mark Jackson go. And a lot of people felt, and rightfully so, Mark Jackson had a role in the Golden State Warriors' success. They didn't win the championship under him, but he did take them to the next level. He put them in position to win the championships, and then he was let go. But one of the owners of the Golden State Warriors said, when no one in the building likes you at all, when then you got a problem. And no one liked Mark Jackson, maybe outside of the players. And if you're creating a terrible culture within the organization, that's a reason sometimes to just move on from a guy. No coach is bigger than the organization. No player is bigger than the team. If you want to take that attitude, with the possible exception of Aaron Rodgers, of course, Mac.
Or Bill Belichick or Vince Lombardi. They may have been a little bit bigger than the organization. But I understand exactly what you're saying, Jack.
Yeah.
Folks, we're going to get out of here for a few minutes. On the other side, we're scheduled to have Santos Perez, Miami Herald writer. He's been wrote in a bunch of magazines. He's a boxing writer, Mud Ruck and others. And also we have scheduled up the IBO president, Ed Levine, will be joining us about that boxing sanctioning, the body of that boxing sanction.
Right.
Santos
Perez is mostly Miami Herald,
But he has written for other publications. But
right, exactly.
Right, is his main thing. And it's going to be a lot of boxing next part, guys. So if you love boxing, you're going to love the second half of the show, as we have 2 great guests coming up. So we'll be right back after these messages, folks. Stick around.
You worked too hard, you ate too much, the cheesecake made you greedy. Let your aching head and stomach hear this message from old Speedy. Alka-Seltzer, plop, plop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is. Those speedy bubbles relieve your upset stomach and headache fast. For acid indigestion alone, Alka-Seltzer Gold. Oh, what a relief it is. What a relief.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
And I'm here to say I am the top banana in the world today. Now you know the best bananas in the land. So don't play apart with an inferior brand. When it says Chiquita, it's a very good day to buy bananas.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
McDonald's is our kind of place. It's such a happy place. Happy place.
I've been meaning to ask
Preach
you,
your turn,
what would
McDonald's.
happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
When the job is done, this guy'll be ready to dig into something mighty good to eat.
How do you handle a hungry man? The manhandlers.
One of the manhandlers is Campbell's vegetable beef. Gets a man-sized supper off to a good hot start. Good.
The manhandlers. If you're talking, they will hear you. Every single time.
I don't want to get killed.
Yeah, well, Kyle's not here.
How come?
Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah, 0 tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's the first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I've made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, Bill, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning. You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We're on live Thursday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, Jack Hirsch. And Jack, with the Semi-Pro Football League, folks, if you got a shot, if there was a Semi-Pro Football team in your area, go down and check them out. It's great football. They'll be playing when the NFL ain't playing. So if you love football, you get to see some great game by young men who are trying to get into college, scholarships into college because they can't get into it otherwise. that end up going into playing arena football. They get tryouts at the XFL, USFL, Canadian Football League, and some even get tryouts with the NFL. So you might see a future star at the semi-pro level before they get up to the big levels of professional football and the NCAA football leagues. So we're due to have Santos Perez in. So hopefully he makes it in. But until he comes in, Jack, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a couple games that to me were unbelievable from the weekend of, the seeding and three teams really trying to get in the playoffs. You had the Oakland Raiders, I still call them Oakland, even though they're Las Vegas, versus the San Diego Chargers, who are now the Los Angeles Chargers. So little old school AFC teams come up matching against each other. And what a game it was, Jack. It went down to the wire, overtime, both teams scrapping. And to me, the Raiders showed a lot of heart, a lot of mental toughness winning that game.
I got to tell you a funny story, Mac. While it was going on, I had an obligation to be in Orlando, and I was at the Orlando Magic Washington Wizards NBA game on NFL Sunday. Believe it or not, I had that long-term obligation. A buddy of mine was hosting an event there, and his friend was talking about the possibilities before the game. Well, if the Raiders play a tie with the Chargers, and I told him in a polite way, stop the nonsense. I don't want to hear this nonsense. There's less than a 1% chance of it being a tie. It's not even worth a discussion. I mean, don't get caught up in this nonsensical talk about a tie. And it came down to the last play of the game. I sent an apology the next day because it nearly wound up being a tie. Brandon Staley, the Charger coach, came under a lot of criticism, and I feel unfairly so, for calling a timeout late in the game because they felt he shouldn't have stopped the clock because the Raiders may have played for a tie. I disagree. When he called the timeout, the Raiders were in position to attempt a 56-yard field goal, and they still would have been able to run a couple of handoffs, meaning they would have gotten closer. They would have gotten around the 50-yard line. And if it's the last play of the game, the Raiders easily could have called timeout with a couple of seconds and went for the winning kick. Why not? They're not going to take a knee if they could, win it with a field goal at the end in all probability. So Brandon Staley wanted to keep things alive for the Chargers, figuring if they could stop the Raiders, at least they get the ball back. And then they have their destiny in their own hands, okay? Even if they make a field goal, they still have a little shot, a little hope. So I can understand the decision he made. The criticism he came under was a little unfair. But what would it have meant for the league, Mac, if both teams were taking knees and they had this gentleman's agreement, a tie puts them both in the playoffs? I think that would have been bad for the game if they didn't try to win it all. But the public is fickle. If you don't take a knee and you try to win and it backfires and you don't go to the playoffs, everyone puts you down for that. Yeah. So whatever you do, it's a no-win situation at the end, as far as the strategy goes.
Well, two things on that game. One, again, I think the Chargers on paper have maybe more talent than the Raiders. I think the Raiders are just are playing out of their minds right now. I don't know how far they'll go, but with Derek Carr and a defense and a running game, they got a shot. But the other thing I want to talk to you about, and I talked to Larry Brown, a Super Bowl MVP on the J&B Talking Shop show last night. That pass interference penalty has got to go, Jack, because when Carr dropped back, he was like at his 40-yard line. He threw the ball into the end zone. We don't know whether the receiver could have caught it or not because it was, I'd say, maybe 10 yards away from him. And he runs into the defensive back, and now you're first and goal on the Chargers goal line. That penalty's got to change. I don't care if they split the difference. I know the old penalty was 15 yards, and the defensive backs would grab him if they had a chance, if they were blowing by him. and they didn't want them doing that anymore because it slowed down the game. But if you're going to give the team first and goal when it's 3rd and 15 and they throw the ball in the end zone and now you're first and goal, you just changed the whole game, Jack. I hate that penalty. They got to change it.
No, Mac, normally they don't call that. If they see the receiver has no chance of catching the ball, it's very rare that they're going to call it. It was just a bad call in that situation. They thought he had a slim chance of catching the ball, so they made the call. Realistically, the ball wasn't going to get caught under any circumstances, but they thought it wasn't an impossibility for him to get to the ball if he wasn't interfered with, so they made the call. It was a little harsh, I admit.
They got to change that penalty, Jack. If you're 3rd and 15 and you throw the ball 30 yards, you just gained 15 yards. They've either got to split the difference, either go half the, if it's a big play like that, half the yardage, or they go back to the 15-yard rule. The defensive backs have hard enough time covering these guys running all over the field where you're going to get called on a 40, 60-yard penalty. That's ridiculous. There's no penalty in the NFL like that. They've got to change that. And the owner's got to get together and change that. Otherwise, it's going to happen. It happens. It's rare. You're right. It doesn't happen all the time. But it does happen, and now you're changing the whole complexion of the game, and that's just wrong. A flag should not change the whole complexion of the game. And
well, what gets me? What bothers me, Mac? Sometimes a flag comes in late, and they allow the players could sell it to the ref. The play will be over for like a second or two, and the player's going to turn to the ref. He's going to complain. The sideline's going to complain. The fans are going to boo, and then the ref throws a flag.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
The refs have to be decisive. If you're not throwing a flag in the first second, after it happened, the flag shouldn't come out after. It's like it's referee. It's like they have to absorb what happened and think, well, should I throw a flag? Should I not throw a flag? And it gets to be, a problem. But listen, we had that major controversial call like 3 years ago or so with the Rams and the Saints in the NFC Championship game when the defender the receiver was hit way too early. A flag wasn't shown. You got to allow certain reviews on that too, to a point. That's why I'm all for extending the timeouts. 6 timeouts a game, let's say. You could use them all together, and you can, anytime you want to question the call, you can. If you're wrong, you lose a timeout, case closed. But they wait till within the last 2 minutes for that. That's the rule.
I've seen when refs make a bad call, they know they made a bad call, and they'll just call holding on the offense or defense the next play and try to even it up. I've seen them do that too.
All the time. They even it out all the time. You're right.
Yeah, so bad call, but great game. Great game. I give the Raiders a lot of credit and for winning that game, a game that they were underdogs. And the second game I want to talk about is the 49ers and the Rams. Now, the Rams in the first half looked like they were going to run away with the game. And the 49ers came out in the second half like wild dogs. I mean, they were so physical with the Rams. The Rams looked soft. The receivers were running over defensive backs. They took 3-4 guys to bring down the receivers, never mind the running backs. The defense was all over Stafford. Stafford kind of choked a little bit at the end with all that pressure. I don't know about the Rams, man. I picked the 49ers to go to Super Bowl. I'm feeling pretty good right now with their next matchup against the Cowboys. If the 49ers play like that all year, they got a shot, Jack. And I don't know if Dallas can handle that physicality of the 49ers if they play that way.
Jim Jeffcoat said something very, very revealing on the last show, that he feels the Rams are basically like an all-star team. And those all-star teams don't win. You could put together the best possible team, the most talent, but if they don't have the chemistry as a team, as talented as they are, they're not going to win. Okay, and you kind of wonder with the Rams, where it's at. But you're right about the 49ers. They could be a real sleeper. Now that they're in the playoffs, they are very dangerous.
Oh, I agree. And guess what, folks? We do have Santos Perez backstage underneath right now. We're going to bring him up and talk a little bit of boxing with him, one of my favorite sports. So let's bring Santos in. How you doing today, Santos?
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning,
Thank you for having me.
Santos.
Doing great, Santos. Glad you could make it in. We, as I was saying before you come up, of course, Jack, Jack's Hall of Fame boxing writer here in New York. Me, I've been following boxing almost all my life, and we love talking boxing on this show. You being from, a great writer for the Miami Herald and the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame. I mean, your articles reach out to a lot of different magazines. And what I ask everybody this kind of question, Santos, what attracted you to boxing and writing about boxing rather than other sports?
It has to be my dad. Being born in Cuba, growing up in Miami, my dad was a big boxing fan, and also he devoured the newspaper every day. So that combination, I guess. And early on, he would tell me stories about Dempsey, Chocolate back, obviously the first Cuban champion, Kid Chocolate. And that's one of the reasons I gradually started following it little by little. First couple of years here in the States in the late 1960s, we gathered around the house for a big fight in for us, which was Louis Rodriguez going up to middleweight and challenging Nino Benvenuti for the middleweight title. And it's sort of like when you have these Super Bowl parties where everybody gets together at a house, and that's how it was. I would think 9 or 10 years old at the time, and he was so close. He was dominating that fight, and gosh, Nino Benvenuti clocks him late in the fight and knocks him out, and that was so deflating.
11th round, right. Benvenuti was cut pretty badly on the bridge of his nose. Rodriguez had pulled ahead on points.
Right.
And he was on his way to winning the world middleweight title, and then Benvenuti caught him the one big punch and knocked him out. And later, Rodriguez said it was a lucky punch, but his trainer, Angelo Dundee, said no, it was a champion's punch. But Rodriguez did hold a world welterweight title.
He did.
He was world champion for a little while. A great fighter, never given his due, unfortunately.
And it's sad. It's sad because he beat Emil Griffith, and in fact that night in 1960, I believe it's 1963 at Dodger Stadium, Sugar Ramos also won a featherweight title. But what's so interesting, eventually I got involved in journalism, sports writing, and one of the first stories that I wrote for the then Miami News, which the afternoon paper we no longer have here, was on Louis Rodriguez. He was training fighters in Miami, amateur fighters, and we talked about that night when he fought Benvenuti. So that started it off. I mean, basically, combination my dad following the sport, and I eventually developed an interest in sports writing, and that's one of the sports that I always, whenever at the newspaper, I told them, look, if you need, not everybody was interested in covering boxing even then, and I told him, no, I love boxing, and I would definitely, if you need me to cover a fight or write a feature about a fighter or a trainer or anyone involved in the sport, I was for it immediately.
So this was before your time, Santos. Boxing in Florida, the 5th Street Gym in Miami, Cassius Clay, on the way up. It was a hotbed of boxing. All the great fighters, Louis Rodriguez, Jimmy Ellis, and on and on. What's the state of boxing in Florida now compared to back in the day?
It's been busy. Obvious certain factors led to the busy year in 21. Believe it or not, we had 25 shows in Miami-Dade and Broward County last year. There are a lot of trainers. There are a lot of not as many gyms. The gyms that you mentioned, Jack, the 5th Street Gym, those gyms, and what is sad though is the amateur. The amateur scene is not as productive as it used to be. Obviously, kids are gravitating to other sports, and we used to have a weekly show in Coconut Grove, which is a section of Miami. That was a hotbed for amateur fights, The PALs were always very involved. Not as much anymore. Professional, as far as professional boxing is concerned, it's pretty healthy. You know, we have a lot of events, but what concerns me is the amateurs. The amateurs is not as vibrant as it once was, and that concerns me.
Well, Carlos, you know, boxing's always been big since I've been growing up till today in the Hispanic community. I mean, you know, Cuba and South America, even in Europe and Spain, and that it's always been one of the major, that and baseball. It's sort of like old school, you know, the United States. It was boxing and baseball way back when,
right?
And of course, boxing has fell off a little bit in the United States for a lot of reasons, right? There's so many belts, there's so many sanctioning bodies. We really don't know who the champions and the contenders are like we used to. But, you know, still down in South America, down over in England, up in Canada, it's huge still. They sell out fights all the time. What do you think happened? I mean, there's a couple of reasons I named, I know. But what do you think really happened here besides COVID, which kind of slowed things down, that really took boxing back a few steps? Where it was always, you knew who the heavyweight champion was, you knew who the number one contender was. What do you think really happened to boxing here?
You mentioned it, the proliferation of belts, and not only belts but divisions. We grew up when there were only 8 divisions, and there goes the heavyweight champion of the world. Everybody knew who that was. Now it's just so many of them. An interesting anecdote: a few years ago, I was allowed to interview Vladimir Klitschko here in Hollywood, which is near Miami. And we met at a restaurant for lunch, and we talked. You know, it was a friendly conversation. It was an interview, but also a conversation. And I looked around. This is the heavyweight champion of the world. Not one person approached him. Hey, can I have your autograph? Can I take a picture? The only person I think that actually approached him was a bus server who was, I think, from Ukraine. So obviously he recognized him. But that kind of told me, wow, this is not good. I mean, this is the heavyweight champion of the world. And I think he was not undisputed. He had held most of the belts. That's just the problem. There's just so many champions, and that's one thing that the UFC has done very well. They know how to market it, and we don't have that marketing prowess in boxing right now. Yeah, you have your attractions like Canelo, you know, Tyson Fury right now, but before, when it was a big time fight, and this is one thing that I've continually bring up in many of my stories, is there's that problem that the best are not fighting the best in their prime. You know, we're not seeing Hearns and Leonard in their prime. We're not seeing Ali Frazier, the first fight. Look how long it took for Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather to fight.
No.
Look how long, you know, the Golovkin Alvarez fight should have happened 2 or 3 years before, but no, it happened when it was convenient for Alvarez to step in the ring against Golovkin. Now we're seeing with Crawford and Errol Spence. That's what turns people off. The best are not fighting the best when they're supposed to.
Yeah, I agree. And the problem, a lot of problems with the sanctioning bodies, so many anyway. If you hold the belts, as Jack has said numerous times, if you don't fight who they have mandatory, they're going to strip you of the belt anyway.
Right.
So it's a continuous cycle when it comes to trying to, you know, to fight the best ones, the number one contenders. A lot of it's the big fights, right? They want to fight Canelo. It doesn't matter who the next contender is, which right. I understand, and it's happened in the past, but they were fighting so much more back then. You were going to see the contenders fight the champion a lot right. sooner than they do now, without it working its way through courts and all that nonsense. So
yeah, there's a big problem. You know, there's also the promotional connections. You know, if for a promoter who basically has most of his fights on one specific TV network, and another promoter has his fights on a competing TV network, that creates another problem. And it was able to be ironed out when Pacquiao and Mayweather fought, and I think recently when Fury and Wilder had their fights, it was carried through multiple networks. But that's also a big hurdle, getting the fights that people want to watch when they're supposed to be fighting.
Santos, yesterday it came over the news. Terence Crawford is suing Bob Arum for racial bias, that he favors the white and Latino fighters, the reason why he wasn't getting the lucrative opportunities. What's your take on Terence Crawford's lawsuit?
I think the tension had built there for a long time. I don't know if it's gonna go far, but and for a fighter who wants to market himself, unfortunately, he hasn't had that crossover appeal, and it's unfortunate because he is, in my opinion, I think he's the best fighter in the world. With all due respect to Canelo, but what Crawford has accomplished, I don't think it's gonna go far, Jack. This is an opportunity for him to be more mainstream, and an issue like this is not going to help him.
Yeah, I agree. You're not going to assign somebody that might sue you, right? So that's kind of
right.
Shooting yourself in the foot. A lot of people watch the YouTube fights, right? The fighters, they're not really fighters. They're the showmen. They come out and they set up fights with has-beens in different sports, whether it's UFC or football or whatever. They're not really fighting fighters. It does bring the young people to boxing, but it's like a mockery of boxing, Santos. It's not real boxing. I hope it carries over into the other fights. I think the boxing commissions are foolish not to take and try to not work with them as being fighters there, but as far as the promotional side, and maybe getting their fights on TV like they do, work with them in that aspect. Not with Paul and all those other idiots that think that, that are doing what they do over there. But it is bringing young people in. And so I don't like it. I don't like the fights. But the promotion is kind of smart. And maybe if boxing got a commissioner, a head guy, maybe it would be better. In fact, I know it would be better because you wouldn't have these random things all over the place. But what do you think about the YouTube aspect of it? Not the fights exactly, because I think it's garbage, but the way they promote it, Santos.
No, they do a great job in marketing it. They're when Mayweather came out of retirement to fight one of the Paul brothers, it did good numbers. And just last week, Jake Paul fought in Tampa a month ago. I'm not a fan of it. Obviously, the deserving fighters like Crawford and other top 10 fighters don't get this attention. It's kind of unfortunate. I agree with you, but will it be part? Look, the freak show atmosphere has always been part of boxing. We had Butterbean fighting in many of the pay-per-views for years, and that tapped in. But he was not the main star. But he became part of the promotion. It might have started out she might have been seen as a circus act, but she turned out to be a great fighter. Christy Martin, when she fought in Don King's pay-per-views, she might have been a novelty attraction early on, but Christy Martin, lo and behold, proved that she was an excellent fighter. I mean, she was not only was she an attraction, but she was also an excellent fighter. But you're right. I mean, the YouTube fighters, they tactically select who they're going to fight. Either it's a 40-something MMA fighter who is long in the tooth and really is not at his peak athletic level, or a 58-year-old Evander Holyfield. That was really embarrassing when he participated down here in an exhibition months ago. They're looking at what Roy Jones and Mike Tyson did in their pay-per-view, and a lot of these old fighters are talking about, no, I want to come back, I want to fight, because they see what Tyson and Roy Jones did. It could be part of a promotion for them to be the headliners. That really gives you an example why boxing is such a sad state right now, because the marketable stars are not there. And do you need a Jake Paul to be your dance partner to really cross the threshold and become a pay-per-view attraction yourself? And that's a problem that Terence Crawford is having right now. Errol Spence, he had, I think if I'm not mistaken, his first notable pay-per-view event was against Mikey Garcia. Well, Errol Spence is an established solid welterweight. Mikey Garcia had to go up 2 weight divisions. But Mikey Garcia was viewed as the pay-per-view attraction. Why? Because he had already built himself quite a following in the lighter weights. And but that you need that dance partner, and unfortunately, boxing does not have enough marketable stars right now for solid pay-per-view numbers. So that's why you see the YouTube personalities with their platforms. One interesting fighter who has tapped into that YouTube medium and has a lot of followers and is actually an established fighter and a very good fighter is Ryan Garcia. He's the type of fighter that he knows how to market himself. He already has the YouTube following. That's a type of fighter that could, and talented enough that could, cross into that pay-per-view threshold.
Unfortunately, he's had emotional issues, which have
That's
took him out of the ring. Santos, which of these two fights does better business? $80, let's say the price tag is. A Fury Usyk fight to unify the heavyweight title, so we know beyond a shadow of a doubt who's heavyweight champion, or a Tyson Holyfield fight.
Which one's going to
10
make more
rounds.
money?
Tyson Holyfield, 10 rounds. It's scheduled for 10, whatever. And they market both fights as well as they can. Which does better business in your opinion? Not which we would get. Obviously, we're going with Usyk and Fury. That's the fight we want to see. But which has higher numbers in your opinion?
Well, obviously, Tyson and Holyfield will do the better. That's
even at this stage, that's the insanity that's going on.
Right.
So we put down the Jake Paul thing, but even though Tyson and Holyfield were great fighters back in the day, they're long past it. And just the thought that the people would tune into it is astonishing.
They'll tune in to see the spectacle. Yeah, exactly. Remember the last time they were in the ring together, Tyson hit Holyfield's ear off. So it's like it's a continuation of a show here. So yeah, but you're right. I mean, Fury and Usyk were huge. They'll do huge numbers in the UK. If they do that at Wembley, that'll be a packed stadium. But obviously, Holyfield and Tyson are the bigger names.
But the nature of the boxing business has changed because the newspaper business has changed. There was a time where people couldn't wait to get the newspaper and read their favorite beat writer, Santos Perez of the Miami Herald. But now you have so much different news all over the place, all over the internet, some of it good, some not so good. Right. Anyone can write and get on the internet these days. So the quality, I don't want to say has gone down, but things aren't like they used to be, where we love getting the newspaper and seeing what our beat writer had to say. What's your take on all that?
It's unfortunate. Yeah, we used to have a weekly boxing column. Then it was reduced to every 2 weeks, and now it's sporadic. I mean, yeah, I would have to tell them, look, this is an interesting story idea. Maybe we should make it into a column or make it into a feature. But yeah, to get the ears, it's all about the clicks. The newspaper looks up what's getting more traffic. Down here, it's probably the Dolphins, University of Miami football, and then the Miami Heat. After that, it's a crapshoot. If it's a Floyd Mayweather story, yeah, it'll probably get some attention. Manny Pacquiao, believe it or not, when we used to have a daily traffic monitor, the most read stories in the paper that day, not just sports. Whenever anything was written about Manny Pacquiao in his prime, it was the most read story in our paper. Why? Because it was just not read in Miami and the greater Miami area, but all over the world. I mean, it was. This is the early days of obviously online newspapers, but now it just doesn't get the attention. It doesn't get the attention. I don't think any newspapers have a boxing beat writer anymore as far as a weekly column is concerned. I could be wrong. Maybe there's still some markets out west in the Northeast. Maybe they might still have some, but that's the struggle that the boxing writer is dealing with. I mean, for them to look at the sports net, and you mentioned, Jack, there are so many outlets that people who follow boxing might just go directly to those websites. whether the quality of the work might not be the best, but it's still boxing related, and they'll probably go to those sites first.
Yeah, I mean, before we let you go, we got Ed Levine backstage, IBO President Santos. We're gonna have him up next. Like I said, we have plenty of boxing this last half hour. Give them your site so they can go over there and read some of your stuff. I read one article quickly, with the Miami Herald, and I saw you in Mudrock and a couple other places, and I quickly skimmed through them. Very great writing on your part, and tell them where they could see you, find you, and read some of your stories.
Yeah, it'll be at herald.com/sports. The problem is there's a lot of emphasis on the MMA, so MMA and professional wrestling. So you have to probably type in the search key boxing once you get to the website, or click my name, and you'll find the articles that way. But it's not we're not getting the exposure that we were getting. But I'm fortunate that every now and then Jack and I met at the fights last week at the Hard Rock. It was an interesting event. I mean, interesting heavyweight title fight, not a title fight, but an elimination fight there with Ortiz and Martin. We an event like that, they were interested in me covering it, but it's not. I used to cover every local show down here, and that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, it's changed. It's changed quite a bit for the worse, and hopefully they find a way to get it back. Again,
let's hope so.
Santos, thank you for coming in. Great guest, great opinions on boxing, and we'll try and get you back on soon. I'd love to hear some when we get a big fight coming up. I'd love to get your take on it. So I'm gonna keep your number, and we got something big coming up. I want to get you back on.
I do appreciate it. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Have a good one, Santos.
You too. Have a good one.
So there you go, folks. Miami Herald's Santos Perez in the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame. Next up, folks, we got one of the commissioners of the sanctioning body at IBO.
President.
Chairman.
You're demoting him, Mac. I mean, you're demoting the guy.
Chairman, head guy. He's the man that runs the thing over there, Jack. So let's bring on IBO President Ed Levine and have him up and talk a little bit about boxing too. Here we go. Sorry, Ed, coming up now. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing fine. Nice to. I've never met Mac before, but nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Ed.
Jack, it's been a long time since I've seen you. Probably a decade or two.
Probably had more hair on my head at that time.
Well, you probably still do. You probably shave what's left.
Well, I got one of these tight knit haircuts a little while ago.
Very tight.
Yes,
I'll take whatever grows back.
You look very good with it not on you, so it's good.
Yeah, very distinguished. Yes, he does.
Right.
So Ed, let's talk. We just had Santos Perez on, great writer for the Miami Herald about boxing. And of course, I'm a boxing fan from way back. My first fight I ever saw was Ali Frazier won, and what a fight it was. And from then on, I was hooked and followed, all the great champions and contenders of those days. And all the guests I have on, you're one of the sanctioning bodies also. They talk about how boxing has kind of got confusing. There's so many belts, there's so many titles, there's so many different champions that it's hard to keep up with it like it used to be way back when. As you know, Ed, you knew who the champion was and the contenders were. And I know IBO is a sanctioning body, and I'm not putting them down on the sanctioning bodies at all. I just wish they could get together more and give us more of the better fights and maybe a clearer picture of who really is the champion and who the real contenders are.
Okay, interestingly, I think it's ironic to some degree that your prior guest, Santos, who I've met many times. He lives in Miami. I live in Miami. He's a very nice man, just very friendly guy, and knows boxing very well. I'm also in the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame. I've been introduced to Santos. I actually went to his induction into the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame. he writes for the Herald. I've been reading the Miami Herald for 45 years. He's never mentioned the IBO. Okay,
Right.
That's what we contend with, and that's what we contend with across the board, particularly with my generation, your generation, the old timers. There's a there's a fallacy. I don't want to call it a fallacy. There's a inherent avoidance of IBO mention because there are too many sanctioning bodies. Boxing started with. Listen, I'm the older generation. First fight I went to was in 1952 in Madison Square Garden with my father. There was one champ back in those days. There was one champion, 8 divisions. Then there became a second sanctioning. Over the years, there was a second sanctioning body, then a third, then a fourth, and the IBO being the 5th. So I understand the confusion. Unless you're a diehard boxing fan, it's pretty hard to follow who the champion is, and that was carried to extremes. Now, instead of just one champion per sanctioning body, there was 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and even the most diehard fans didn't know. Boxing lost a lot of fans because of the confusion created by the multiplicity of champions.
Right.
Even I couldn't name, my friends who follow boxing would say to me, "Who's the champion of a certain division?" I said, "Well, I can't give you a direct answer to that. There may be 2, 3, 4, or 5, or more, 10." So the current state of boxing has, over the past decades, is to the point where we have what we have now. 4 major sanctioning bodies, a 5th sanctioning body being the IBO, which is not considered a, quote, major sanctioning body. And what I see in boxing today is more and more control by the sanctioning bodies, and less control by promoters, managers, and boxers.
Yeah.
Sanctioning bodies, just to a large degree, have become governing bodies. There's a difference between the two, between a governing body and a sanctioning body. A governing body, in my view, is a commission.
Right.
In an ideal world, there'd be one commission for the United States that would control boxing. It's never going to happen in my lifetime or your guys', in my opinion, anyway. But boxing is now controlled to a large degree by the major sanctioning bodies and the major promoters and platforms that work with them.
Yeah.
Jack, would you disagree with anything I've said so far?
No, I agree with what you said. And myself as a writer, I've been somewhat guilty of not mentioning the IBO at times when I could have, as well. And going forward, that's going to make me a little more aware. But I haven't wanted to mention in a lot of my reports the other sanctioning bodies as well. But you're kind of obligated to do it. I like to go on who I feel is the legitimate champion per division, the person who stands out like far and away. But there are different champions in different divisions. But I think the way the IBO can join the other sanctioning bodies as far as being a 5th wheel and get a certain type of parity, I think if you get a superstar like a Canelo Alvarez who says, "I'm only fighting for the IBO. I don't care about the other belts to unify it. I'm willing to fight the other champions, but they can keep their belts. All I want is the IBO belt." All of a sudden, that gets the IBO a certain parity. Now, it's interesting looking at the IBO champions. There's certain big name fighters on there, like a Gennady Golovkin, okay? I mean, those are the type of fighters, like if they hold an IBO title but don't hold a sanctioning body belt from, the other organizations, that makes the IBO stand out, I think, a little more. But when they're no names as the champions, when I mean fighters who don't have a recognizable name, I don't think that helps the IBO. I don't think it helps with the credibility if we don't know really who the fighter is.
Okay, I agree with what you're saying to some degree, but the way boxing is set up now, well, first of all, there have been fighters that have met that criteria and nothing changed. If you'll recall, when Roy Jones Jr. fought Tarver, Antonio Tarver, Tarver had, I think, you can look this up on BoxRec, Tarver had 3 belts, and he was being told who he should be. He had a mandatory, or he was being told who he had to fight next. And Antonio Tarver says, I'm not fighting those mandatories. I have a chance to fight Roy Jones Jr. here. So I'm going to fight Roy Jones Jr. only for the IBO title, because that's monetarily and fiscally the most responsible thing for me. So he didn't fight for defend his other titles. He fought only for the IBO title, beat Roy Jones, and held, I don't know for how many fights, held only the IBO world title. Now, how many writers mention that? Very few. So it's
which of the three fights was it?
Hold on, I'll find out. Erica, would you look up Antonio Tarver and find out, I want chronologically, his fights against Roy Jones Jr. when they started. First of all, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Jack. People say, well, why don't more people recognize? Why don't you get better champions? And the reason is there's a monopoly out there.
Sure.
Boxing, the way it works today, whether you recognize it or not, is controlled by a very small number of promoters, managers, and platforms. And what boxing, the way it is today, works for them. This is, whether we like it or not, or whether we want it to stay that way or not, it works for those who are at the top. They don't want fighters. They don't want to be interfered. There is a monopoly. There's no question of that.
No, yeah, there's no
No,
doubt.
but that isn't it self-serving for any sanctioning body to have a different champion? Let's say all 5 sanctioning bodies, the other 4 and yours, had the same champion. The sanctioning bodies wouldn't stand out if they all had the same champions. It kind of benefits them, or they need different champions basically to stay in business.
Well, you're an idealist again. You want one champion, and that's, in today's era, that's rarely going to happen.
Well, not only that, Ed, I think if that was the case, then mandatorily, and this is why I think you need a commissioner, every heavyweight in each division should have to fight each other. The champion of each division should have to fight each other. If you're gonna have a playoff game in any sport, the best of the best fight each other. If you're gonna have them fight in just their own sanctioning body, if you're just gonna have people from Aram's organization fight people from Aaron's organization, that does nothing for the overall boxing world. I mean, it's great for him, but it's not great for everybody else. So
this is why.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is why some major promoters have intimated or even said, we're going to ditch the sanctioning bodies. We want the best fighters to fight each other.
Right.
But the mandatories aren't necessarily set up that way. So what happens is you get a mandatory fight that interferes with. Look at the heavyweights. I mean, how many heavyweights have tried to become the only champion? It's because of mandatories. It's become almost impossible to do it. I agree with, in theory, everything you're both saying. One champion per division, the 4 best fight each other, and you have one champion. It's going to be a rarity.
Where does the IBO stand on mandatories and enforcing them?
Okay, here's the first of all, most people think that we don't have mandatories. We do have mandatories. However, we don't enforce mandatories unless that champion is not fighting quality opposition. Period. If a champion's fighting the best possible opposition and the best for him financially, promotionally, and every other way, and then we won't impose a mandatory. Just won't.
Well, that's a great attitude to have. In the case, Usyk is your heavyweight champion, I believe, the IBO champion.
Yes.
And when he gets done with the rematch with Joshua, whoever wins that fight, I mean, logically, if they could fight Tyson Fury next, that's the fight to make.
Absolutely.
But one of the sanctioning bodies is going to say the winner of that fight has to fight. They're mandatory. They're going to get stripped. And so I like the IBO's attitude. If it's the best opponent out there, offers the most money, you don't enforce a mandatory, situation. So that's a good attitude to take on behalf of the IBO.
And we will also do eliminators. We have two fighters on an even level, both similarly ranked, and the champion there's been no mandatory. The champion's fighting good fighters, but we feel it's certain fighters that have reached a certain level. We will do eliminators, but not a lot. I think we let the marketplace and what the fans want to see dictate mandatories.
How frustrating, Ed, how frustrating is it? We touched upon it a little before. Is the IBO not quite being able to take the next step in joining the Big Four, always being on the outside, but being noticed, but being on the outside?
I've developed thick skin over 20 years. That's one way to describe it. Listen, when people compare the IBO to other sanctioning bodies, when they say there's the Big Four and then there are all the others, well, you as someone who knows boxing, there are no others. It's the Big Four and the IBO. The others, alphabet numbers, they don't have any meaningful fights, any meaningful champions. But meanwhile, we're thrown in that same description. Oh, it's the Big Four. That's it. And some boxing writers will mention the IBO now that we've reached that level. But as far as when we're grouped with all the others, I mean that's like crazy. I've always believed and still do believe that we're the most fundamentally sound sanctioning body there is. I don't want to be part of the Big Four. I've never wanted the IBO to be part of the Big Four. The word parity is a different system. The Big Four have agreements amongst themselves, as you know. They have formal written agreements in their rules and agreements that rotation of mandatories, whose turn it is, they're set up to keep boxing within those four sanctioning bodies. That's just that. It's not a secret. You can read anything you want in their rules, and you'll see it. They will never mention the IBO. They will rank our fighters, our champions. If we have a good champion, they'll put him in their rankings because they like that champion to be. It's almost like saying that's not a champion. He's number 5, or he's number 3, or he's number 2. I think there's an analogy that I can give you. Do either of you play golf or watch golf or know anything about golf?
No, I watch some golf, don't play.
Okay. There's 4 major championships.
Yeah.
Okay.
Use tennis. I'm a bigger tennis fan.
I'll do that too.
Major ones. Yeah.
I will. Okay, I'll do both. Okay, so in golf, there's the U.S. Open, there's the Masters, there's the PGA, and there's the British Open. 4 majors. But there's also another tournament called the Players' Champion. That's called the 5th major. Now, in tennis, I've never thought of this before, but in tennis, you have Wimbledon, You have the U.S. Open, you have the Australian Open, and the French Open. More or less correct? I'm not just doing that off the cuff. Does that mean that someone fights for another championship that it's not a major? Well, I don't think so. Not today. There's other major championships in every sport that are recognized as champions. I'm going off on a little side path here.
Listen, Ed, I'm gonna run for commissioner of boxing, and this is how I'd set it up.
Okay.
You guys each have your champion in each division. When they finish fighting each other, the next contender in each division steps up to fight the champion, and it just keeps rotating like that all the time. This way, we know who the champions are, we know who the contenders are again, and even with 5 sanctioning bodies, we still can follow it. And as far as jumping off in different divisions like Canelo does, it would be acceptable in rare instances, and that's it. I want to see boxing come back to where we know who the champion is. I don't care if there's 10 sanctioning bodies. I want to know the best fighters in each sanctioning body, and then they can fight, and then the next contenders in each sanctioning body step up. Real simple, makes it fun again, and everybody gets credit. And I don't care about Bob Arum. I don't care about Don King. Promote who's in your sanctioning body, where you work, as you're supposed to.
The only way that'll ever happen is if there's a national commission, and that's not.
I'm the commissioner. I'm going to be the commissioner, Ed.
Well, that won't happen. The last person I try to convince to do that, who recently passed away, he was the United States Senate, Arizona. What's his name?
Harry Reid.
No, the one who was in the war was a prisoner.
John McCain.
Yes, so I reached out to John McCain probably 15, 20 years ago and told him the state of boxing at that time, and actually got a response. And because he was a boxing fan, and he used to go to boxing, loved boxing. And I said, there's a need in this country for a national commission to oversee. Right now, they're all state commissions that oversee boxing in their state. He was interested, but it didn't go anywhere. But the only way you get to see what you want to see is with a national or a worldwide commission. That's not going to happen.
But back to the IBO, maybe a way to raise the IBO's profile would be at raising your profile. How about you getting out a little more front and center? Mauricio Suleiman does it with the WBC. Darryl Peoples doesn't do it with the IBF. You don't see him too much around. And the WBA and WBO are basically non-United States entities, okay, for the most part, with their leadership. But have you ever thought about raising your profile, being in the ring, giving a belt, talking to the media a little more? I mean,
I did that at first. The first 4 or 5 years I did that. I actually went to almost a lot of the IBO world title fights and had lunches, dinners with the press, with the boxing writers. I went out of my way to talk to them the way we're talking today. But during that era, it was almost impossible. They were so set in their ways that, and rightfully so, the feedback I got is there's too many sanctioning bodies. We don't want another sanctioning body. You can be the best leader of a sanctioning body. You can have the best sanctioning body. No more sanctioning bodies. And I understood that at the time. And it was their response was not illogical. Their response was totally acceptable. As the years went by and I backed off because I saw this, I'm getting nowhere with this. This is in their brains that they're stopping it. They're drawing a line in the sand. It is what it is, and it's going to stay. We don't even want 4, let alone 5. But then over the years, as 4 world champions became 8, 12, and 16, and different aluminum titles, gold, silver, bronze, and all kinds of different world titles, it became worse and worse and worse. And my plea to, that we're a legitimate fundamentally sound sanctioning body that doesn't do the things you dislike fell on deaf ears. No more sanctioning bodies. That's what I face. So I stopped doing it. Now everything is in social media. And social media is what we try to concentrate on, because the old school's gone. People don't read newspapers anymore. You had Santos on. I mean, I used to read the Miami Herald every morning. I don't read the Miami Herald every morning. People used to, the whole press thing has changed. You know, now you've got, there used to be a core, every major city had a core boxing writer who wrote for that newspaper. And I try to concentrate on those core writers 20 years ago. They're all gone. You know, typically they're just gone. I wanted to answer your earlier question. I just was handed this on Tarver and Jones. Okay. Roy Jones fought Tarver in 2003. There were 3 titles on the line. Then the next fight, Tarver fought Roy Jones in 2004. Also 3 titles.
Well, here's a challenge. It's probably the 3rd fight, because he'd beaten Jones' 2nd fight, so he commanded, my guess is, a certain amount of power where he could call the shots and say, I'm fighting for the IBO title. I don't have to the other, because his name was so big at that point.
Correct.
That would be my guess, yeah.
Your guess is 100% right. So what happened is then he wanted to fight, he then fought Glenn Johnson only for the IBO title.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When you see, when you're that big a name, like Canelo Alvarez, then he could just decide, I'm only fighting for the IBO title. I couldn't care less. And he could have a title attached to his name and still be as big as ever. He would fight for other titles, but then he could announce, I'm giving up the other title. I just want to win and then I'll give it up, but I'm not giving up the IBO title. But what are the chances of finding someone like that?
But to your point, you said if we did that, we would get more recognition. It didn't happen. Not only did he beat Glenn Johnson, he beat Glenn Johnson. He fought Glenn Johnson twice.
He lost to Glenn Johnson the first time, then beat him in a rematch. He wasn't of Canelo's stature, though.
Right. But then he beat Roy Jones Jr. in 2005 in Florida, only for the IBO title.
I was at that fight, yeah.
And then he fought Bernard Hopkins, only for the IBO title.
Oh, okay. Interesting, yeah.
So he had a progression of only IBO titles over a period of 2 or 3 years. And he was, his attitude was, I'm going to fight the fights that make me the most money.
Yeah.
And logically so. But just, I know we're going to run out of time here, but just ask yourself one question. Why do all these great champions who fought for us over the years, why do they fight? Why do they want the IBO title even when they have others? Be aware that they want the IBO title because they know it's not going to be, they're not going to have a mandatory imposed upon them, take it away from them. B, if they're told to fight somebody they don't want to, as Jack just said, they'll just drop the other title and take the one that's most monetarily rewarding that the fans want to see. And C, they know that when they negotiate, they have that title no matter what. It helps them negotiate their position. So we have dozens of marquee champions over the years who've held our titles. They're not stupid. Their management wasn't stupid. Golovkin, 20 defenses. Klitschko, 20 defenses. The list goes on and on. Lennox Lewis, they wanted the IBO title. It was a staple, something that they know they had, and it was theirs. And until they lost it in the ring, they weren't going to lose it.
Wade, I'm going to let you finish up on that note.
Thank you very much.
As you said, and listen, pleasure having you on. It's great to get a lot of inside information, confirm some of the things that I already knew and Jack knows, but a lot of people don't. And it's great to have people and guests like you
Thank you
on
very
to
much,
share your
guys.
knowledge. And we appreciate you coming in. And hopefully we'll get you back on. If we get a big title match and IBO's on the line, we're going to get a hold of you again, Ed. We appreciate it.
That would be my pleasure. Nice to see you again, Jack.
Take care. Same here.
Stay well. Bye-bye.
Take care. So there you go, folks. Ed Levine from IBO. We're out of time. We got another show coming up behind us. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a great day.